Daniel Whitmore never imagined that Lila's secret would destroy everything he loved, but when he discovered the truth about his son, Thanksgiving turned into a nightmare of betrayal, rage, and unspeakable horror. Daniel Whitmore had always been seen as the model husband, the kind of man people admired for his calm demeanor and dedication to his family, but behind the neat suits and polite smile, a quiet tension often simmered beneath the surface. On Thanksgiving morning, Daniel moved carefully through the house, adjusting the silverware, straightening the napkins, and making sure every detail reflected the image of a perfect holiday. His wife, Lila, was busy in the kitchen, humming softly as she arranged the turkey and side dishes, her hands precise, almost ritualistic, yet there was something in her eyes that made Daniel pause. Their son, Jacob, bounced around the living room with the energy only a 10-year-old could summon, his laughter echoing off the walls, blissfully unaware of the unspoken tension growing in the air. Neighbors had already started arriving, carrying pies and casseroles, greeting the family with smiles and compliments, and Daniel forced himself to return each greeting with polite warmth, masking the unease crawling in his chest. There was something about Lila's nervous glances, the way she lingered near the doorway or brushed her hair from her face repeatedly, that made him feel off balance, a subtle warning he could not ignore. He shook his head, blaming the nervous energy on holiday stress, but the sensation lingered, gnawing at him as he tried to focus on the cheerful chaos of the morning. No one noticed the small envelope tucked at the edge of the counter, hidden beneath a stack of napkins, seemingly ordinary yet holding a secret that would change everything. Daniel moved through the motions of greeting guests and preparing the table, unaware that in just a few hours, the discovery of that hidden truth would shatter the family, transforming a day meant for gratitude into one that would be remembered for horror. The Thanksgiving celebration continued with laughter and chatter filling the Whitmore home, but Daniel could not shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. Lila moved about the kitchen with practiced ease, carrying dishes and offering polite smiles to guests, yet her hands trembled slightly, and her eyes darted nervously whenever Daniel glanced her way. He noticed the subtle tension in the room, the quiet pauses in conversation, and the way Jacob's laughter sometimes felt forced, as if he too sensed the undercurrent of something hidden. Neighbors commented on the delicious aroma of the turkey and complimented the perfectly arranged table, but Daniel barely heard them, his mind preoccupied with a gnawing suspicion he could not articulate. He tried to focus on the familiar comfort of family tradition, the sight of pumpkin pie cooling on the counter and the smell of roasted vegetables mingling with warm bread, yet every movement of Lila made his pulse quicken, every glance toward her seemed charged with a silent warning he could not ignore. The children played in the corner, their energy masking the tension that grew with each passing minute, and Daniel found himself glancing toward the edge of the counter where something had caught his eye before, a small, partially hidden envelope that seemed to pulse with significance, though he had not yet touched it. As the room filled with holiday cheer, a storm quietly gathered beneath the surface, invisible to the guests but undeniable to Daniel, who could feel the fragile calm of the morning about to shatter. Little did anyone know that the laughter and warmth of the gathering would soon be replaced by chaos, fear, and the unthinkable horror that waited just beyond the surface of this ordinary Thanksgiving celebration. While Jacob played upstairs, oblivious to the tension in the kitchen, Daniel's eyes were drawn again to the small envelope he had noticed earlier, tucked almost invisibly beneath a stack of folded napkins. Something about its presence felt deliberate, as if it had been left for him to find, and a mix of curiosity and dread propelled him to pick it up. The envelope was thick and unmarked, but the moment he broke the seal, a chill ran down his spine. Inside were letters, photographs, and medical documents that revealed a hidden chapter of Lila's life Daniel had never known, a secret so shocking it seemed impossible. His hands shook as he sifted through the papers, each one confirming a truth he had suspected only in the smallest, nagging ways. The boy he had loved and raised as his son, Jacob, was not his biological child. The realization hit him like a physical blow, each heartbeat pounding in his ears as a mixture of anger, betrayal, and disbelief consumed him. Memories of small moments, long overlooked, suddenly clicked into place: Lila's secret phone calls, the unexplained absences, the subtle changes in her behavior. The house, once warm and filled with the aroma of Thanksgiving, seemed suddenly colder, as if the walls themselves were closing in around him. Daniel's mind raced, torn between confronting Lila and suppressing the turmoil threatening to spill over. Every laugh from Jacob, every polite comment from a neighbor, now felt like a mockery of his life, a life built on a foundation that no longer existed. The discovery of the envelope had shattered the illusion of family security, replacing it with a heavy, suffocating weight of betrayal and an anger he could barely contain, a storm that would soon erupt in ways none of them could have imagined. Daniel sat frozen for a long moment, the envelope still clutched in his hands, his mind spinning in a whirl of disbelief and rage that he could neither control nor escape. The warm, familiar kitchen, once the heart of his home, now seemed alien and suffocating, every detail twisting into a reminder of Lila's betrayal. He could see her moving around the room, smiling politely at the neighbors, carrying dishes as if nothing had changed, and each movement fueled the fire building inside him. His thoughts raced uncontrollably, jumping from anger to sorrow, from disbelief to a desire for answers he did not know if he could bear to hear. How could the woman he loved, the mother of the boy he had raised as his own, have kept such a monumental secret? Each memory of Jacob's milestones, his first words, his first steps, now seemed tainted, rewritten in Daniel's mind by the truth he had unearthed. He struggled to breathe, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him like a physical force, and a darkness began to creep into his thoughts, blurring the line between grief and vengeance. For hours, if it were hours, he felt trapped in a liminal space, neither fully awake nor fully sane, consumed by what he had discovered yet unable to act, yet. The cheerful chatter around him, the laughter of children and the clinking of dishes, became almost unbearable, a cruel soundtrack to the storm inside his mind. Daniel realized, with a chilling clarity, that once he acted, there would be no turning back, no possibility of reconciliation, no chance to undo the destruction he could feel rising like a tide inside him. The calm veneer of Thanksgiving had shattered, replaced by a growing, uncontrollable force that would soon consume everything he had known as family. The moment arrived with a terrifying suddenness, as if the house itself had held its breath, waiting for the storm inside Daniel to break. Lila, carrying the pumpkin pie toward the table, moved with her usual grace, unaware of the storm brewing behind her husband's eyes. Daniel's hands shook, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and disbelief, and in that instant, the world narrowed until there was nothing but the envelope, the truth it contained, and the woman who had kept it from him. Time seemed to slow as he raised the gun, his vision narrowing, every sound around him fading to a dull roar. The first shot echoed, shattering the festive calm, and in the blink of an eye, the room erupted into chaos. 22 shots followed, each one punctuating the horror with brutal finality. Neighbors screamed, ducking behind chairs and tables, while Jacob's terrified cries rang out from under the dining table where he had hidden, trembling with confusion and fear. Lila's body crumpled to the floor, the life drained from her as the room transformed from a scene of warmth and celebration into one of blood and terror. Daniel's hands were slick, his breathing ragged, yet in that moment, he felt nothing but the hollow emptiness left behind by betrayal and rage. The turkey, the decorations, the laughter, they all seemed surreal, grotesque, as if the ordinary Thanksgiving morning had been replaced by a nightmare that no one could escape. In a single, irreversible act, the illusion of family, of love, and of normalcy was shattered, leaving behind a scene that would haunt the witnesses forever and mark a day that had begun with gratitude but ended in unspeakable horror. Jacob cowered beneath the dining table, his small body pressed against the cold floor, eyes wide with terror as the horrifying scene unfolded above him. The sounds of chaos, the screams of neighbors, the echo of gunshots, the crashing of overturned furniture, filled the room, but in that moment, he could barely comprehend what had happened. His mother, who had always been his protector and his world, now lay motionless in a pool of blood, and his father, the man who had raised him, the one he trusted most, was the cause of this nightmare. Daniel sat nearby, the gun still in his hand, staring at Lila's lifeless body with a vacant expression, a hollow emptiness where love and reason had once resided. The envelope that had revealed the secret about Jacob's parentage lay forgotten on the counter, the truth it contained overshadowed by the immediate horror of violence. In the silence that followed the final shots, Jacob's mind raced, struggling to understand how the world could have turned so violently in just moments. The warmth and safety of his home had vanished, replaced by an unbearable weight of grief, fear, and confusion. Outside, sirens wailed, approaching too late to prevent the tragedy, signaling that the ordinary rhythm of life had been shattered forever. Daniel did not attempt to flee or explain himself, as if he were already trapped in a prison of his own making, consumed by the rage that had driven him to destroy everything he loved. For Jacob, the realization settled painfully: the family he had known, the man he had called father, and the woman he had adored were all gone in different ways, leaving him alone in a world that no longer made sense, a world scarred by betrayal, violence, and an unspeakable loss that would follow him forever. Within minutes, the wailing of sirens grew louder as police cars screeched to a halt outside the Whitmore residence, neighbors peering anxiously from behind curtains and doors. Officers rushed into the house, taking in the horrifying scene: the bloodied dining room, overturned chairs, shattered dishes, and the lifeless body of Lila Whitmore lying in a grotesque stillness that made the heart tighten. Daniel Whitmore sat nearby, motionless, the gun still in his hand, staring blankly at the carnage he had caused, as if unaware of the officers surrounding him. Investigators quickly secured the scene, noting the small envelope on the counter and the letters and photographs spilling out from it, which revealed the shocking truth about Jacob's parentage. Witnesses, neighbors who had attended the Thanksgiving gathering, were escorted outside, their voices trembling as they recounted the horror they had witnessed in disbelief. Jacob was pulled from his hiding place under the table, trembling and wide-eyed, clutching a small toy for comfort while officers wrapped him in a blanket and tried to calm his racing heart. Forensic teams began documenting the scene, taking photographs and collecting evidence, every detail adding to the grim puzzle of what had led Daniel to commit such an unimaginable act. News crews would later flood the small town, capturing the tragedy in headlines and television broadcasts, but in that moment, it was the silence after the chaos that was most profound, broken only by Jacob's soft sobs and the occasional commands of police officers trying to maintain order. The reality of the morning's events settled heavily over everyone present. A Thanksgiving meant for gratitude had been transformed into a crime scene of unimaginable horror, where the secrets hidden in a small envelope had unleashed a violence no one could have anticipated. The aftermath of the tragedy rippled through the small town like a shockwave, leaving friends, neighbors, and even strangers struggling to comprehend how a familiar, peaceful family could be shattered so violently. News of the Whitmore Thanksgiving massacre spread quickly, plastered across television screens, social media feeds, and local newspapers, turning the once quiet town into the epicenter of national attention. Reporters camped outside the house, cameras capturing every detail, while residents whispered in horror about the man they had known as calm, dependable Daniel Whitmore, now infamous as a murderer. Conversations in grocery stores, coffee shops, and schools were dominated by the unimaginable crime, with people struggling to reconcile the image of a loving husband with the horrifying acts he had committed. Families who had attended previous gatherings at the Whitmore home recounted moments of suspicion and subtle tension that now seemed like ominous warnings, and the once cheerful streets felt heavy with grief and fear. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in jail, isolated and silent, the enormity of his actions settling around him like a suffocating fog. Investigators worked tirelessly, piecing together the events of the morning, documenting evidence, and interviewing witnesses, while psychologists and media analysts debated what could drive a man to such extreme violence. Jacob's extended family tried to provide comfort, but even they struggled to shield him from the trauma and the relentless questions that followed. The town itself seemed to pause, as if holding its collective breath, waiting to understand how betrayal, rage, and secrecy could collide to destroy a family so completely. In every corner of the community, the memory of that Thanksgiving hung like a shadow, a grim reminder that beneath the facade of normalcy, the darkest truths could lie hidden, ready to explode in ways no one could ever predict. The trial of Daniel Whitmore gripped the town and the nation, turning the private horror of that Thanksgiving morning into a public spectacle filled with tension and disbelief. Courtroom seats were packed with journalists, neighbors, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the unraveling of a man who had once seemed ordinary but was now revealed as capable of unspeakable violence. As prosecutors laid out the events of the morning, detailing the 22 shots that had ended Lila's life and the discovery of the envelope that had triggered Daniel's rage. The room was filled with a stunned silence, punctuated only by the soft sobs of Jacob, who was seated with relatives, clutching a small toy as his eyes darted between the evidence and his father. Defense attorneys attempted to argue that Daniel's actions were driven by a temporary loss of control, fueled by shock and betrayal, while prosecutors painted a picture of premeditation and moral collapse. During the proceedings, further secrets emerged. Lila had hidden financial documents, letters, and personal communications that suggested she had been planning to leave Daniel, perhaps even to take Jacob with her, deepening the narrative of deception and betrayal. Witnesses recounted subtle clues and odd behaviors in the months leading up to the tragedy, hinting at a relationship fractured beneath the surface. The moral complexity of the case became a topic of heated discussion, with debates about whether Daniel was a victim of circumstance or a cold-blooded murderer. Every detail, from the letters to the photographs to the psychological evaluations, added layers to the story, revealing the fragile boundaries between trust, betrayal, and vengeance. By the time the trial concluded, the courtroom, like the town itself, had been irrevocably changed, left to grapple with the devastating consequences of secrets kept too long and emotions pushed to the breaking point. In the months following the trial, the aftermath of the Whitmore tragedy settled over the town like a heavy fog, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Jacob, now living with extended relatives, carried the weight of that Thanksgiving in every quiet moment, the memory of his mother's lifeless body and his father's vacant stare etched into his young mind. Therapy sessions and school counselors could do little to erase the trauma, but the child learned to navigate a world where love and safety had been violently severed, each day a reminder of how quickly life could be destroyed. Daniel Whitmore remained in prison, sentenced to life without parole, a man stripped of family, freedom, and any claim to normalcy, left to reflect on the irreversible consequences of his rage. The town slowly returned to its routines, but the echoes of that morning lingered in every home, every street corner, and every conversation. Friends and neighbors spoke in hushed tones, recalling the bright Thanksgiving mornings of the past while grappling with the reality that a single hidden truth had shattered an entire family. Local schools held discussions about safety, secrets, and the fragility of trust, while the media continued to follow Jacob's story as a symbol of innocence caught in the crossfire of adult deception and violence. Over time, the Whitmore house was sold, but even the walls could not erase the memory of what had transpired within them. Thanksgiving would forever be tainted for the town, no longer a symbol of gratitude and warmth but a reminder of betrayal, anger, and the consequences of secrets kept too long. For Jacob, for the relatives who raised him, and for the community as a whole, life continued, but the shadow of that day remained, a permanent reminder that the darkest truths often lie just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to emerge and destroy everything in their path.